I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Are you prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
That I will execute
the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States faithfully.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth.
Golden Globes, and it is not lost on me that at this moment there are some little girls watching as I become the first Black woman to be given the same award.
Williams could throw at her, but in the end, there was no answer to that phenomenal service that Serena Williams has.
Here comes the Biles. Wow. Very good landing.
We've watched one of the great performances. She's going to be the all-around champion. She's the new queen of gymnastics.
And I remember which way the cleavage planes were going. And I knew that if I could put a retractor here and one here, and I just pulled, that it would separate. And it did.
The successes of Neil deGrasse Tyson, Tyra Banks, Michael Jordan, Whitney Houston, Barack Obama, Oprah, Serena Williams, and Ben Carson, among others, have created the illusion that racism has decreased significantly since the era of Jim Crow. Black exceptionalism has perpetuated the notion that anyone, no matter how poor or how Black they may be, can make it to the top if they try hard enough. But it isn't just about effort. There are still systems in place today preserving the racial inequalities that have plagued this country from the very beginning. Five minutes.
Mass incarceration is an issue that people in this day and age tend to ignore because there aren't any signs of blatant racism within the law anymore. Even during the war on drugs, a large cause of mass incarceration, any racism that occurred happened under the table, so no laws or ideas could be outwardly shut down. The laws against marijuana, for example, don't specifically target Black and Latino people, but the race distribution of people in prison due to marijuana shows which people are and were being targeted. Cannabis was common in the United States even before the influx of Mexicans, but it increased in usage once immigration started to occur. Americans started to call it marijuana instead, to link the drug to Mexican origin, and marijuana was taxed soon after. This was clear targeting of the minority group in America. Harry Anslinger also started using scientifically unsupported ideas about marijuana, such as stating that the drug caused violence in Hispanics or caused black people to create evil music otherwise known as jazz, which created an atmosphere of fear towards the minority populations. This resulted in even more blacks and Hispanics being sent to jail because they were more likely to be accused of using weed. A similar sequence of events happened with cocaine. There was the development of a far more severe punishment for the distribution of crack associated with black people than powder cocaine associated with white people. Crack is almost identical to powder cocaine. It can simply be inhaled faster and create a stronger high for a shorter period of time. These minor differences made crack cheaper than cocaine, which made it more popular within the black community, which then caused the American government to pass the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which didn't penalize powder cocaine nearly as much as it did crack. These laws never identify race in writing, but the biases that are embedded within them cause the perpetuation of racism and, in turn, mass incarceration due to race. There's other laws that don't explicitly make the prison system racist, but propaganda and subconscious biases that we all have cause the system to be that way. For example, the stop and frisk rule allows police to stop anyone with reasonable suspicion, which often results in the arrest of more black people than white people because of the stereotypes that have been drawn upon them. Most drug dealers and users are white, but 3/4 of the people in prison for drug offenses are black or Latino. Other issues lie in the current judicial system, which is also inherently biased. 80% of criminal defendants can't afford a lawyer, which doesn't allow them to fight for the most reasonable sentence. The Supreme Court has also reinforced hidden racism within many other cases, such as with McCluskey v. Kemp or U.S. v. Brignoni-Ponce. All these small forms of bias and inequality slide by because there's no more signs of overt racism in our government today. The Supreme Court reasons that purposeful discrimination couldn't be proven by the McCluskey case, though it's likely that racism was the basis of accusation. In U.S. v. Brignoni-Ponce, the Supreme Court decided that race can't be the only factor in looking to arrest, but that doesn't mean it's not still a factor. The police have found ways around their decision to perpetuate racism in society. In addition, state and state police can't be sued unless there is explicit discrimination by race. The problem is that it never is explicit anymore. Racism right now is defendable because discrimination is not overt. This is why mass incarceration is such a difficult topic to pinpoint and fix. It's hard enough to definitively show that it exists, so executing a solution is nearly impossible right now. Like Michelle Alexander explains in The New Jim Crow, mass incarceration in the United States had, in fact, emerged as a stunningly comprehensive and well-disguised system of racialized social control.
We heard about the discrimination faced by those who are convicted and incarcerated due to our corrupt judicial system. But how are the lives of those same people impacted after they let out of prison? The rights that were once given to these people without a moment of hesitation are now snatched from their hands as soon as they walk out those prison doors. Though they are free, they can't escape the metaphorical prison that society is about to put them in. Kalief Browder's story shows this clearly.
On the night of his arrest, Kalief Browder was walking home from a party with his friends in the Bronx when he was stopped by police.
Kalief was charged with a crime, a really petty crime that it turns out he didn't commit.
Then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct, and most likely we're going to let you go home, and then I never went home.
The courts basically punished him for having the audacity to not take a plea deal and to want to take it to trial. And in that time, in those 3 years that he was sitting there and not being charged for anything, that's when the mental health issues started to deteriorate. He started to get into fights.
Kalief suffered through so many beatings, both by the people he was locked up with and the guards, he ended up attempting suicide on several occasions. After almost 3 years in jail waiting his trial, they dropped all the charges and he was set free. 2 years after his release from jail, Kalief Browder hanged himself at his home in the Bronx.
Kalief's story is incredibly heartbreaking, but not uncommon. A 2006 study by the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that 56% of state prisoners and 64% of jail inmates were mentally ill, and a 2015 study found that the suicide rates among released male prisoners is 8 times higher than the national average. Along with extreme trauma from prison comes loss of rights for ex-convicts. From the loss of voting rights to lack of jobs, ex-convicts are robbed of basic rights, even though they are released from prison. According to the website for the National Conference for State Legislatures, in 12 states, felons lose their voting rights indefinitely for some crimes or must receive a governor's pardon in order for voting rights to be restored. In 22 states, felons lose their voting rights during incarceration and for a period of time after, but the rights are automatically restored after their period of time is finished. Former felons may have to pay outstanding fines and fees before the rights are completely restored. With their loss of voting rights also comes the lack of available felon-friendly jobs for ex-convicts. According to a study done by the Urban Institute in 2003, only about 40% of employers are willing to hire an ex-offender. The same study also concluded that though white offenders receive half as many job offers as their non-offenders counterparts, black offenders receive 2/3 fewer offers. This only shows that race and offender status play large roles in access to jobs for ex-convicts, especially black people with criminal records.
Warehouse worker, but had no source of income. I need to hurry up and get a job. Telemarketing, don't like it, but they're the only one that's hiring right now. How you doing? I'm calling about the job in the paper. I'm calling about the ad in the paper. Hello, yes, this is Lamont Maycom. I called earlier about the job. I'd like to know, are you guys still hiring? I have a felony, and I'd like to know if you guys are felon friendly. Oh, the position's been filled? Oh, it's been filled? Oh, the position's already filled? I have yet to get a call back on any resume I submitted.
Due to their loss of rights, ex-convicts are lowered to the status of second-class citizens. Felons who come out of prison have no one to turn to because of the negativity that surrounds the idea of criminals. The prison system seems to cage black people in a box with no way out, forcing them into a society that shuns them and causes them to turn to bad means of comfort. This turns into a cycle of black people being arrested, let out, shunned, and arrested yet again. So, how can we solve this long-standing issue? Obviously, there's not one single solution that will get rid of this discrimination. However, we can start by spreading awareness. America must educate themselves about the prison system and the way people are treated in and out of it. The main reason for discrimination faced by ex-convicts is because of the inert fear from the people surrounding them. People are scared of ex-convicts and therefore refuse to help integrate them back into society. The result of this is the box on applications, in which the applicant must state if they have convicted a crime in the past and if they were imprisoned for it. This box ends up taking away most of the applicant's opportunities for a better future. Spreading awareness among society can hopefully instill a compassion within people for ex-convicts and will motivate people to integrate them into society rather than push them away.
What we've long understood, though, is that some communities have consistently had the odds stacked against them. That's true of rural communities with chronic poverty. It's true of some manufacturing communities that suffered after the plants they depended on closed their doors. It's true of some suburbs and inner cities where jobs can be hard to find and harder to get to.
These communities that have had the odds stacked against them are often communities of color. In the United States, poverty disproportionately affects people of color, especially African Americans. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the poverty rate among African Americans is 21.2%, while the poverty rate among white Americans is only 8.7%.
I ain't got to live tough, and so I had to get a second job. But is it enough? No. I make the money, there's not enough money to pay my expense. Basically, I fell behind.
People living below the poverty line often fall behind. Then they are stuck in a loop of debt, easy prey to people who will loan small amounts of money, payday lenders. This debt makes it near impossible for them to escape poverty, as they work to simply stay afloat. Children who grow up in households experiencing poverty are more likely to be poor as adults. Growing up in poverty makes it more difficult to get an education, which limits a person's options for the rest of their life. Growing up in a poor community can also be incredibly dangerous.
If I have to just, speak about the reality of our existence as teachers in an inner city, well, so be it. This is what it's about. It's like you sometimes feel like you're teaching in some, disenfranchised country, that there's this war going out there, and it's like this war that's being waged against our young people, especially our young black men. So.
Communities stuck in the poverty cycle are more likely to lose community members to violence and the justice system. Dr. Peter Leone, a professor at the University of Maryland, is involved in reviewing prisons to determine whether they are meeting the standards promised. He works most often in juvenile facilities. He believes that there's a direct link between poverty and those people in prison. The demographics of most prisons are overwhelmingly poor people of color.
In our system, whether you're detained or free pending trial is not a matter of how dangerous you are or how much of a flight risk you pose. It's a matter of whether you can afford to post your bail amount. And so Bill Cosby, whose bail was set at $1 million, immediately writes the check and doesn't spend a second in a jail cell. But Sandra Bland, who died in jail, was only there because her family was unable to come up with $500.
These poor people of color are not in prison because they deserve to be there. A broken system takes advantage of them.
Some people tell the story that poor folks are lazy freeloaders who would cheat and lie to get out of an honest day's work. Others prefer the story that poor people are helpless and probably had neglectful parents that didn't read to them enough, and if they were just told what to do and shown the right path, they could make it.
People criticize the impoverished without an understanding of the struggle that they experience or the tenacity that they have.
What is your message to President Trump?
Come and help us. Instead of critiquing us, come help us. And you will see that we need help. Bad.